Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Fast Talkers as we whiz around some wonderful paddock people and find out what they think about this week's biggest talking points. And I'm delighted to say we have a great panel for you tonight. Let's start off by introducing you to racer F1 correspondent Chris Medland. Chris, when was the last race you went to? Have you just got back from Spain?
I have, yeah. I've actually been lucky enough, if you want to look at it that way, to be at all of them so far. So, yeah, not missed one yet.
Look at you. Get a badge or something.
Well, yeah, someone said that there's a COVID Cup for whoever goes to the most races in these conditions, which doesn't sound like something I want to win, I won't lie.
Okay, yeah, you can have that. I'm not going to fight for it. Next up, we have Louise Goodman, ITV Motorsport presenter. And Lou, I want to know, what are the trophies that you've got behind you? They look awesome.
There's a mixture, but the one I'm proudest of is the one in the middle, which was finishing third in class on Wales Rally GB.
Oh, that's who are you driving with?
Maurice Hamilton was my co-driver.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the lovely Maurice Hamilton.
What a legend, both of you. That's awesome. I want a little trophy like that, and I want to have driven with Maurice Hamilton.
Trophy, Jenny. It's a big trophy.
It is a big, well, it is a big trophy. It's a huge trophy.
I have anyway.
See, I've offended Lou and we haven't even started yet. We're in trouble. Let's go to WTF1 presenter. It is Matt Gallagher with a hard G. Matt, delighted to have you on with your professional race seat and your professional microphone. How's life? How's tricks?
Yeah, good. I don't have any trophies behind me. I have an open closet, so that's not really so exciting to show off. But yeah, it's not too bad. Obviously, it's been a difficult time for everybody, but maybe slowly going back to normality. Obviously, having F1 back has been a save for a lot of people, I think. So yeah, all good. I'm
really intrigued as to what you've got actually in your open closet behind you. Have you got anything that you're
sorts.
Really embarrassed about?
No, otherwise it wouldn't be in camera shots. So it's there's another one that way, which there's all kinds of Ron Burgundy outfits and everything, but that's not on camera.
I'm disappointed now. We'll have to come over to your house and reshuffle them all. Put the really embarrassing stuff front and centre.
I've embarrassed myself enough on camera, so I'm sure it won't be anything different.
Right, lots to talk about this week, and we've had our first 6 races. It's hard to believe that we've whizzed around some of Europe already, and Lewis Hamilton is already flexing his muscle at the top of the championship. Chris, seeing as you've been to them, we can start with you. What's it like covering Formula One in this kind of modern day and age of coronavirus?
It is rubbish. I won't lie. From my perspective, with the reporting I do, I get basically locked into the media centre. I'm lucky enough to be at each race because I host the Formula 2 and Formula 3 press conferences. So I get to speak to some drivers in the flesh for those, which is an absolute treat because you can't rest the time. Everything's done via Zoom. And yeah, you just sit in the media centre the whole time and watch on big screens. The perk is you get to see some F1 cars out the window, which is cool. And you can see into the paddock in certain races and wish you could go in there, but we're not allowed. We're banned from it. Broadcasters can go in, but the broadcaster that I normally work for isn't on site. So that means I'm not allowed in. So yeah, it's rubbish in that sense. But there is still that feeling of normality when you get the 2 hours of the race or qualifying's on and you are just focused on the job as normal. That's when it all feels pretty normal, which is a nice relief.
Lou, I think the last time I actually saw you in the flesh was in Australia. Is that right? Were we actually there? It seems a little bit like a daydream now.
It seems like a lifetime and a whole different world ago, doesn't it? Yeah, so I arrived in the paddock on the Wednesday when there was, a little hint of what's going to be going on this weekend. And of course, by Friday, nothing was going on. It was a bizarre weekend. And I've been to some bizarre, I reckon that outdid Indianapolis, whatever year it was, as the strangest Grand Prix I've ever been to. Yeah, it was weird, very weird.
And what have you made of the season so far? 6 races in. I mean, Australia seems like a lifetime ago. And when we went back to Spain, it was like, oh yeah, this is where testing happened this year. That's just blown my mind.
I've really enjoyed it, actually. I spent so many years working full-time in Formula One, and I must admit, I don't watch all of the Grand Prix now. I mean, some of them clash with the British Touring Car Championship, which is my sort of, my main tele-hosting job for ITV. But I've wanted to watch all of the races this year, even if I haven't been able to, watch them. Like, I think one of the British Grand Prix, I caught up with like the following Thursday or something like that. But, there are races I've wanted to watch. I should haven't said that actually. I did watch the Spanish Grand Prix. I was going to say live, but I don't have Sky, so I watched on Channel 4. Kind of wish I hadn't bothered. That was a bit of a snooze fest, wasn't it? But it's the first one this year that I've thought, why did I bother? I could have spent that hour doing something a lot more profitable.
Know that feeling. It was a little bit painful, and we'll talk about that in just a moment's time. But Matt, this has been the first year that you've actually done some commentary for the F1 umbrella. How have you found it, kind of coming from a very different angle?
It's been ridiculous, a whirlwind, because I never really expected it to come through. Obviously, I'd worked with Alex Jakes on the F1 esports side of things, which is much more my cup of tea. You know, I know that game inside out, and it's quite easy to be a colour commentator in that regard. But then when they saw the relationship that we had, and FOM thought, look, we'll give him an opportunity. I read the email. That's not real. That can't be. That actually is from FOM. Wow. Okay. But yeah, the whole weekend was crazy because, well, it was probably the hardest weekend for anyone to have debut commentary ever, because it was just washed out, red flags, delays everywhere. So, you know, me and Alex were talking all kinds of rubbish, but it was a weekend I'll look back on and be so proud of, because it was just, yeah, it was something I'd always dreamed of, but never thought it would ever happen.
I think rain always gives all of us the opportunity to do what we can best. I have been in pit lanes and paddock when it's been raining, and you have to just go out there and find stories, find something to talk about. The first race I ever did was 2011 Canada. I mean, it was just crazy. I knew no one in the paddock, and all of a sudden I had to go around and just find people, introduce myself to people, and then just launch upon them and sort of ask them lots of questions. I mean, Lou, you must have, in your time in the paddock, done some hoofing stints in the rain.
It's when you earn your money, isn't it? It's when you earn your money, when you've just got to effectively fill. I can remember, and in fact, it wasn't because of rain. It was because I think it was Alan McNish went off into the barrows at Suzuka, and we were live on ITV. I kind of did about a 40-minute interview with Gerhard Berger, which is no great problem because Gerhard's very easy to chat to, but we just had to fill. I had a similar scenario in the British Touring Car Championship when it rained. And we had to stay on air, and it was getting to the point where I was virtually saying to the mechanics, and tell me what's in this drawer of your list, explain what this spanner does, because we just talked about absolutely everything, and you know, it's a finite amount of things you can talk about.
Chris?
I was going to say 2011, I was doing the live text commentary for ESPN on that race, and that was hard, but at least you allowed gaps where you were thinking the next thing to write, or you ask questions to readers and they can start helping fill for you. But I think the best sort of rain-affected bit of filling that I've had to do was last year at Suzuka on the Saturday, where they said, don't come to the circuit, we're going to call it off, it's going to be too dangerous, just stay in your hotel, which I took very literally. And after being to a karaoke bar the night before, I stayed in my hotel all day, and I think Jennie did a podcast with you about 3:00, which was the earliest I could surface.
Yeah, I think we had to reschedule podcasts. You see, you get the theme. Chris was a little late for doing this program. You get the theme now because Chris was a little late for doing that podcast as well. But it was a great podcast, sat around a hotel lobby. It was only media that were there that were related to F1. So it's kind of this very strange atmosphere of people sitting there eating their little pot noodles, because that was the only food anybody could really have, drinking beer, looking at the rain, just getting worse and worse, thinking, yeah, okay, maybe we shouldn't have come to Japan. Maybe we shouldn't have gone out and got our supplies last night. Maybe we shouldn't have got so stinkingly drunk. Great fun, though.
It was great fun. And I seem to remember that podcast going down very well with Joe Saywood and Sam Collins. We did a lot of talking about Suzuka. So, yeah, that was good of F1 at least to call that one off in advance, so that it wasn't you guys stood getting absolutely soaked in a pit lane thinking, how much longer do I need to talk for before we might or might not get going again?
Yeah, trying to find something to hold on to so you didn't blow away, that sort of thing. Yeah, I think we did an hour and 7 minutes talking in that podcast. Epic. It might have even been more exciting than the Spanish Grand Prix. So let's come on to the Spanish Grand Prix, because Lou, you've already said it wasn't the most scintillating of races. Should Spain get kicked out of Formula One? It was kind of out, then it came back in. Lou, does it deserve a place on the calendar?
I don't know. I mean, it's always a dull race, isn't it? Or generally, can I think of an exciting Spanish Grand Prix? Not off the top of my head. And it's always, you know, the theory is, it's because the teams go testing there, and so they know the circuit so well. And but I don't think you can equate January testing with, the temperatures that you get in August. And I don't know there's just something about the configuration of that circuit that just doesn't engender exciting racing. Should it be kicked off the calendar? I mean, I remember it coming on to the calendar, Barcelona, prior to that, racing in Jerez, but, when nobody really turned up. I mean, it was back in the days when bike racing was absolutely everything in Spain. And then, Alonso came into the sport and we moved to Barcelona. And initially it had loads of atmosphere. But I don't know, traditionally there's the conversation every year after the Spanish Grand Prix, why is Formula One so boring? And when you put it on the back of what, as I said earlier on, have been some really exciting races, it does raise the question mark. What is it that is it just the track that just does not produce good racing?
Matt, is it any better when it comes to simulated sport in Spain?
No, I think there was actually quite a funny thing where the drivers were streaming through, obviously, when COVID was first at its biggest force. And I think the drivers found out about Spain being the next track that they were racing at in the F1 esports thing they were doing, and they all were like, "Oh, for God's sake!" None of them were happy to hear Catalonia was going to be the next race they were going at. And for me, it's just a perfect storm of so many things wrong. The last chicane, just dig it up and do something else with it, because it just doesn't promote any sort of good racing. And the DRS passes we see are either so easy or they can't get anywhere near. And it's not a heavy braking zone into turn one. It's just too much. It's a decent track to look at and to drive on in a game, but every year it just doesn't seem to work out. So clearly there's something going wrong, unless there's big money coming from it. Which we don't really have a say as to whether or not that is the case, but I can't see why it's still there from a sort of spectator experience.
Was it Carlos Sainz who repeatedly was cutting the last chicane, just couldn't be bothered to do it, so would take the long MotoGP loop in it until he got told off that he wasn't allowed to?
I mean, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't blame him if it was Sainz doing it.
He knows the track well. So, okay, if we're going to get rid of Spain, we've got quite a few races coming in this year that will be new or that we haven't been to a while. If we look at Portimao, we look at Imola, potentially we're going to go back to Turkey. Which one's a keeper for you, Chris? What would you say was the race that was coming in this year that you would love to keep? I know we haven't been there yet. I get that.
At this point, I'm actually going to say Portimao. Or the circuit of the Algarve, as the pedants keep telling me that I shouldn't call it Portimao. But as much as Imola looks great, I think we're going to see something similar to Barcelona, where that's going to be a tough place to overtake. We might get a bit into the first corner, but on the whole, I think cars will look great on a Saturday and it won't be a classic on the Sunday. So Portimao out of those for me, because I also think Turkey, if that comes back on, is more likely to be less of a test with these high downforce cars. Things like turn 8 and the multi-apex corner that everyone's getting so excited about is going to be easy flat. I think Albon said after Spain, maybe the first lap out the pits in FP1, you might not go easy flat. He said after that you will. So that doesn't sound quite so fun. But part of it actually is I'd keep Spain on the calendar as the barometer for we need to get racing good at this track, as in we need to develop cars that are better, that are raceable on this circuit. And if we do that, we can race them anywhere and we can have a good show anywhere. So I think you need that worst track that is your kind of benchmark to work at, and Spain would be it.
Is there any reason why in testing we don't have a final day just race so they can actually test their cars in race conditions, and then we'd know if Spain was boring, processional or not?
It's funny you mentioned that. We had a discussion on the final day in Spain when we said what they should be doing is testing something like the reverse grid format that they've been talking about. It was like, why not use a testing format to trial those things? And again, you're at a track where overtaking is difficult and you're probably going to get the worst example of it. So if it works in that scenario, it's going to work anywhere. I guess the reasons are there's not enough spare parts and it's too much for a risk at that stage. Not every team will have their car reliable and it just could cost them an absolute fortune if it all goes wrong. Plus, you don't have that many fans there or the infrastructure to deal with more than, a couple of thousand fans at a time.
No fans anyway.
Well, now there's not. At that point, to be fair, that's the best attended F1 track running we've had all year was pre-season testing. So, I think it's just something that'd be a bit too much of a risk, but it's not a bad idea.
Okay. Matt, same question to you. Which of the tracks coming back would you like to keep?
Yeah, I'm the same with Chris, because Portimao just looks like a better Catalunya in every you got the fast last section, you got the elevation changes, which just look ridiculous. I was watching a GP2 race back in the day. I can't remember what year it was, but it's going to be outrageous. And I don't think the cars will be ready for it, to be honest. So for me, I think that with the unpredictability, we could get a really good race there. Because you look at the track layout, it does look like Catalunya, but better. So I'm ready for that to kind of just sweep Catalunya off the track, off the calendar completely. And we have Portimao. But I'm really excited to see Imola again, just from my childhood, and, the fact that they'll be going back there again. And then also combine that with the fact it's a 2-day weekend. That's unpredictable at its best. So and if for a few drivers have any issues, it's just going to be crazy. So I don't think Imola's going to be great for overtaking. I can't really see where they're going to overtake, but it's going to be a nice nostalgia to watch.
Lou, what do you reckon?
I haven't seen the layout of Portimao, and thanks, Matt, for the references to your childhood and all of that kind of thing, because I've got to go with my heart and say Imola. I have just so many fabulous, some not so fabulous memories as well, obviously, but I have lots of fabulous memories of Imola. Okay, it's partly down to the fans, the Tifosi, who were always amazing there, and clearly that there won't be any there. But just Imola was it was the first European race of the season, and suddenly the motorhomes were all there. It was springtime in Europe. There was sunshine. There were, mad Italians everywhere, fantastic food, and happy days. So there you go. Nothing to do whatsoever with the layout of the circuit or anything like that. But I just got so many lovely, lovely memories of Imola. What it will produce in terms of racing, obviously the cars are very different to how they were sort of back in the days when Formula One was last there. But I'd just really love to see it on the TV again. I actually was very lucky. I did I think it was my very first experience of going around on the drivers' parade, sort of interviewing on the back of the flatbed truck, was going around Imola, and that was just something really special to be up there, just looking at this iconic circuit, basically from a driver's eye perspective.
For all those things that Lou's just said, I totally agree. I'm so delighted that we have 3 races in Italy this year. It's going to be awesome with Mugello as well and Monza, for the food and the weather and the scenery. Sadly, it's not quite as it would be in normal times. But then I'd also argue the Algarve, sort of late, October time, bit of late sunshine. I don't think you get time on the beach, but a bit of golf maybe. I mean, all of that stuff, the bit that people hate us for. Yeah, can't wait.
Tell the one man who's still travelling.
Though, does it? It just doesn't have the same history.
No, that's true. I've been to Imola a couple of times for work reasons. I was there for the 25-year anniversary of the 94 weekend. And off the back of that, it was pretty special to go there.
See, Mark, I was talking about this today. I don't have any memory of Imola as a Grand Prix track after 94. None. It's like the only thing in my head with Imola stops at 94. And I'm kind of glad at the moment I don't have a plan to be sent there. And I'm kind of glad because I don't know how emotionally I would handle that. Chris, you obviously went for the 25th anniversary. Was it emotional to go there?
Yeah, it was. I was actually doing some quick maths, and it was the 20th anniversary because I was like, it wasn't last year. That was just me being terrible with my memory. But yeah, it was very emotional actually. I stood with Ratzenberger's parents at the point he died and did like a minute's silence with them. We just got talking to them beforehand, and they wanted to walk the track, and it was very eerie then. Ferrari sort of took that event over and made it a big thing about them. Which I'll admit meant it took away a bit of that kind of proper reflective feeling, and it was a bit more of a chance of Ferrari fans to go to Imola and then to say, oh, what would have happened if Senna had come to Ferrari because he was going to, which was a little bit, I thought, almost tasteless to kind of hijack it a bit like that. But yeah, it was a very eerie place to visit for the first time. But since I've been back, once you have got that out of the way, it's a stunning venue and it's just a beautiful part of the world. And I always remember things like JB getting on pole position there and thinking, is he finally going to get his first win? Or that Alonso Schumacher fight that there was. Like, yeah, there's been some great stuff there that I remember that's much happier memories.
And Lou, presumably, were you old enough to be there at 94?
I was there, yeah. I was the press officer at Jordan at the time. So obviously it was Rubens Barrichello was our driver who had that huge stunt on the Friday that kind of was the start of that just chain of events that nobody could ever have imagined could have happened. I mean, that was it was a massive shunt. People remember the story because he sort of, came to her in the medical centre with Aitken looking over him, because he was very much a sort of little protege of Aitken's. And then obviously there was the tragedy of Roland, such a young driver, just a genuine nice guy as well. And then the disbelief of what transpired on the Sunday. It was the strangest plane journey home, because, as is so often the case, the majority of the paddock was on the same plane. And it was just a very eerie, silent plane journey home, and being met at Gatwick. We flew into Gatwick by, reporters and all sorts. And a weekend. Horrible. Very, 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 very strange and memorable for all the wrong reasons weekend.
Yeah, it's strange that I can never get past that weekend in my head. I'm hoping that this year's Imola will create some much happier, fonder memories that I can associate with it, because I love Mugello, obviously love Monza. Mugello, my first memories were MotoGP when I went there, and that was full of the Tifosi, and they all came there with like engines rigged onto the backs of pieces of wood, and like the crowd there. Chris, I don't know if it was incredible.
I've not yet. I'd love to do some MotoGP. It does sound absolutely bonkers. But then it's funny when you say about the way a chain of events happened. Speaking of MotoGP as well at the weekend, and watching that from Austria, and seeing a chain of events from Moto3 and Moto2 racing and the crashes in that, and then what happened. You do get these weekends, don't you, where it just suddenly seems like something's just kind of wrong. And I think that's been quite well relayed about what happened in Imola in the past. But that's why it's a different track now as well. And that's why we're going to say we're not going to see much overtaking, but it is thankfully a safer place to go and race.
To say that MotoGP crash at the weekend, having worked in MotoGP and seeing some horrific crashes and having to report on them and fatalities, you just thought, oh God, here we go again. And how nobody was seriously hurt at the weekend, I honestly don't know. And we've all been in those situations at races where you look at what's going on in front of you and you just think, there for the grace of God. And Lou, that was just a horrific accident, and thank goodness everybody got away. But motorsport is dangerous. It's always on the back of our pass, isn't it? We look at it quite glibly and go, yeah, there we go, motorsport's dangerous. But to actually be the people that are there reporting on it when it all goes wrong gives you a certain amount of responsibility and sensitivity.
I think particularly when you are broadcasting live from an event, you have to be so careful, so measured. I always remember coming at it from the other side. So I started life as a press officer. So I was the person, who there were procedures and protocols to follow, how you got your information, how you disseminated that information. Obviously now I'm on the other side, imparting the information, but I still have in the back of my mind all of those things I was aware of then, of having, you've got to be 100, you are, my job now, all of our jobs now, we're breaking the news to people. We may be telling families back at home, we're filling, friends and family in on the situation. So you've got to be so careful and so sure. And it's a bizarre scenario when those events happen. And possibly the most recent event that I've been at, when there's been, thankfully, everybody came out of it, I say okay, but was Billy Munger's accident. There was a massive, great big delay there whilst we were waiting and trying to find out news of Billy's condition and how he was. And you just have to be so careful in those situations, and just that's when all of your contacts come into play, actually finding out what's happening, and then delivering it in the right way.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, like the last one I was at obviously was Antoine in Spa last year, and I was broadcasting at that one. But a lot of these guys, it's not just what now happens on the main bill in the main race that people watch on TV. There's a lot more relatable drivers at a younger level. I mean, Matthew mentioned it as well, like the F2 guys working with WTF1, like I think Jack Aitken works them a lot. There's a lot more that's known about a lot of the drivers from a much earlier age. There's a much bigger connection there. So it almost then widens the pool that when something does happen, it's not just like I'd never heard of that person. It's someone that you knew a lot about, which is makes it tough as well. And like Louise says, like everyone's so connected now on social media, something like that. If you tweet out that there's been something bad and it's not so bad, people are going to have a go at you for that. Or if you get it anything slightly wrong, you can't mess around with that information.
Yeah, Max, what is your experience of working with the younger drivers who are coming through? Because often it is those guys who are more vulnerable than those in Formula One.
Yeah, with WTF1, we tried to, give some sort of exposure to a lot of F2 drivers. We work with Jack Aitken, we have, logos on his front wing and things like that. But, we do work with tons of them, like Callum, who's doing fantastically well in F2. One of my first ever videos was doing a karting video with him where he absolutely trounced me. But, it's things like that where it is so strange. So Antoine, for example, I never met. But as Chris said about being so connected, I looked on his profile and I saw that he followed WTF1, and it's almost like I knew kind of what he was like because of the content that he followed. It's really strange at this day and age of social media, but yeah, we try and give as much exposure as I say to F2 drivers and to make sure that they are known for the right reasons. But sadly, sometimes when things go wrong, it's difficult.
I'm so glad you mentioned Callum, because we're going to move on, and that was almost seamless. It's almost like you're a proper presenter and everything. Because I want to talk about Ferrari, and the relationship that Sebastian Vettel has with Ferrari at the moment is clearly fairly caustic. So Lou, from your experiences in the paddock and having, seen many Ferrari drivers come in and out, having seen many drivers go to Ferrari and try and build a championship winning team, what's gone wrong?
I think it is, it's difficult to say, in that I know from working inside a team, when you're looking in from the outside, it's very difficult to gauge exactly what's going on. There's a lot that goes on behind closed doors that, we as the media aren't party to. But it doesn't take much nous to realise that things are not well there. The relationship is just, I guess when you're being absolutely trounced by your teammate, making so many mistakes, it makes me sad. It genuinely makes me sad, because I really like the guy. I remember him bouncing into the paddock as a fresh-faced youth back in the day, just full of vigour and life, and with the world at his feet. He's a 4 times champion. But he's just lost his mojo, and he's just not performing, and his head's gone down. And I think no matter what the sport, when you see somebody fall off what was a pretty high, ledge that they were on, it makes me sad. And as I say, I like the guys. So when it's happening to somebody that you feel an affinity for, I think it's even sadder. Exactly what's going on, I have no idea. I mean, you guys are, probably more involved in what's going on in the paddock these days. Chris, sorry, Jennie, we're taking over here.
All the presenting going on here, isn't it? It's great. I feel really sorry for Seb. I actually think he's been really badly treated. The way that Ferrari tried to explain that certain matters had changed and that coronavirus meant they were going to look down a different way. It's going to be a long recovery path. It wasn't the right time to stick with Seb. But then they were in serious talks for winter. And that's when they went to Carlos and said, look, we want to sign you. And he started talking to McLaren about what was going to happen, showed that wasn't true. They never offered him a contract. And I think Ferrari are making it as hard as they can right now, really. I think a lot of what's going on, the radio exchange at the weekend, it was one of many. I mean, Spain, Silverstone, there was a few pointed ones from Seb that were enough. He knows that's public. He's smart like Alonso, and he's letting people know that there's cracks here, that he feels he's not getting well treated. And then in Spain, when he asked them directly, and it was good of FOM to broadcast this, wasn't it? When it was, what do you need me to do? Tell me what you need me to do with these tyres then, what's going to be the plan? And then they don't tell him for a while. And then they come back and go, how about this? And it was almost at the point of no return. And he's like, for bleep, I asked you about that earlier. He made it clear. He it was dirty linen in public, wasn't it? It was, here's what I want to do, or here's what I need from you. Are you going to help me or not? Are we a team right now or not? And they thought about it for a while and went, well, not, maybe we are, not sure. So, you could see the anger then, and some of his answers in press conferences and things. He's been very careful, but there was a point he said, I think on Thursday in Spain as well, that he doesn't want to get dragged into it when people kept pushing him on a certain line. He was like, look, let's be honest. I know what you're doing. I know what you're looking for. I know what you're asking. I just don't want to get dragged into that. He didn't say it didn't exist like he would in the past. He didn't say you guys have got it wrong. He just said, I'm not going to be the guy that slates the team in public. But I think he will fairly soon if he hasn't already, really.
Matt, what do you make of his form this season specifically?
Oh, it's a curious case, isn't it, really? Because Leclerc, obviously, with the fact that he was signed again for an extremely long time with Ferrari, is not going to help Sebastian's mindset anyway. Then coming into the season and Ferrari have just dropped him out of the blue. I'm not surprised that his form's the way it is, especially when, you know, he has nothing to drive for. He's completely fallen out of love with Ferrari, considering back when he first joined, he wanted to emulate Schumacher. He wanted to do all of those amazing things. It's just such a weird thing for me to look at, because obviously you have COVID and, you know, teams are losing money and everyone's losing money. And you'd think that Ferrari wouldn't try or manipulate Sebastian to then lose points in race weekends where they could easily be fighting Racing Point in the Constructors' Championship by the end of the season. Why would they even not manipulate, but why would they not give Sebastian everything that they possibly can? And that team radio message that Chris mentioned was just baffling. The fact that Sebastian had to ask the team to go and do their job was just ridiculous. You know, the fact that he had to give them a task to say, right, this is what I want. What lap times do I have to do until the end of the race? It's not saying that things are wrong, but you can see it. It's broad as daylight that things aren't great. So I don't blame Sebastian for not giving it his absolute all. You know, he's got kids now, and he's got things to look about away from Formula One. He's obviously had this break as well with COVID, and I'm sure his priorities have changed, especially now Ferrari have dropped him.
3 races coming up in Italy, one of them being the 1000th celebration for Ferrari. Awkward timing, isn't it, to have a driver, Lou, who is not happy with the team, and from someone who's worked within that, it must be so difficult to try and manage that situation.
And when you think that I was working at a team like Jordan, when everything was out in the open, everything, you know, it was a much smaller environment, it wasn't political. You know, Eddie swore a lot, we ignored him, we got on with doing the job, and it was a very happy, cohesive environment. But, you know, Ferrari's always been a different kettle of fish in terms of the way that it operates, the way that it, you know, it is so in the public domain. I think probably more than any other team, the intense focus of the Italian media on Ferrari is just huge. They have to fill space every day, you know. So it's it's I forgot what the question was.
How difficult to manage that situation.
It's well, I think it's fair to say, when you look at how the situation is being managed at the moment, just generally speaking, when, you know, there is that big public celebration going on, it's just going to exacerbate everything that's not cohesive and that's not really, you know, going well at the moment, isn't it? I think it just puts it into perspective. If you're trying to celebrate a high and there's a very, very obvious low going on in your midst.
Very, very awkward. Just finally, I would love to talk to you and hear your opinions about Max Verstappen. He is now the man trying to challenge Lewis Hamilton. It looks like Bottas has just hit the sort of buffers at the moment, once again with his season. How good is Max Verstappen? Let's start with Matt. What do you reckon?
He's bloody good. He is. I don't know how he performs in that Red Bull the way he does, because you watch him through free practice, you watch him in qualifying. If you get a side-by-side with the Mercedes and the Red Bull, you can just see how difficult that Red Bull is to tame. And how I see it is that the Red Bull has a ceiling somewhere near Mercedes pace, but getting there is very, very difficult, and you need a Max Verstappen. Whereas the Mercedes, I think a lot of people could be a Bottas. Because it just looks like every time they just turn into a corner, it's stuck. It doesn't get any oversteer, understeer, just wherever you want to go, that's fine in the Mercedes. Whereas the Red Bull, we've seen it with Gasly, now Albon. Max Verstappen is the teammate killer. Like that's just straight up. The fact that he is second in the championship is slightly embarrassing. I say slightly, very embarrassing for Valtteri Bottas. The fact that he's getting beaten by a Red Bull driver. But for me, he has been pretty much flawless this season, apart from obviously crashing at Hungary before the race, but he made up for it. And the fact he's even splitting that Mercedes at any point and then winning a race, of course, at Silverstone is baffling.
Lou?
I would say go one further and say bloody good. I think he really is. He's so exciting to watch. I love the spirit of the guy. I think he has everything that you want in a champion. Basically, he has a massive self-belief. He has a supreme driving ability, but he's now getting to that point where he's got a real maturity that goes with it as well. The bandwidth that he clearly has when he's in a race car to be thinking about 101 different things, to be having a bit of banter going on and all of that kind of stuff. It's those things that move a racing driver up from being a really, really good racing driver to being something very special. And I think he's definitely, I say going into that territory, he's definitely in that territory now. And I just love the spirit of the guy. Okay, he can be a bit chippy at times, but he's very much himself, isn't he? He's got a great character. I love the atmosphere that he brings with him. Any circuit that's full of Dutch fans is always going to be a bit crazy, isn't it? So that's a bonus as well. I just think he's brilliant to watch, and he's entertaining both on and off the track.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's such a shame that Red Bull aren't able to get close enough to Mercedes really for this to be a proper fight. We all tried to believe it after Silverstone, the second race. And I did, to be honest. I think Max did as well. I think that's why he was so sharp with his engineer in Barcelona, was when they realised, actually, we can't fight Lewis today. That was actually a disappointment to Max, because he suddenly thought, I can. Especially if he could get into second at the start and give him a race. And I think it was all set up just for a little bit where he's like, yeah, here we go. And Lewis drove away from him. So that was a bit demoralising. But Matt and Lou are both right. He's just so good. He's got so much capacity when he's in that car. And that also shows that he's got that room to keep improving, keep learning. He's kind of, Lewis is there breaking records, but you can see the similarities there. You can see the ability that goes beyond just driving a car quickly that Max has that's similar. And it's why it would be so epic to see them going toe-to-toe properly. And hopefully we'll get a few times that'll work out this season with the right conditions, at the right track. At least that Red Bull is clearly the second quickest car. And it's just such a shame that it let him down in the first race, because he was running second at that point. And even if he finished third and it had been a dull finish rather than the crazy one we got, the gap would have been a lot smaller and he'd be within a win at least of Lewis. That just means, okay, there'd be a bit more pressure on. So that's a real shame that didn't go his way, because he has been absolutely faultless. As Matty says, there's nothing he's done in an actual session that has been bad. I think he's had the odd spin, actually, because, again, the car is such a handful. But then, it was just Hungary and sticking it in the wall beforehand. And even then, that he could just jump in. And then, did everyone hear him before Silverstone, the first race, going on the grid? And he sat there before the race and goes, oh, it's a bit calmer than last time out, isn't it, guys? So he's just got that. He's clearly got the whole support of that team, which allows him to do that and gives him that confidence as well. And you earn that support by being that good.
I think for me, he comes across with a bit of old school personality. He's not kind of this PR trained guy who just moves around a little bit robotic. And admittedly, some of the guys in the last couple of years have developed a bit more personality, but he's taken all the bits that I want from a hero and put them together. He's got, amazing talent on track, clearly. He's got attitude. He said he was going to headbutt a journalist if they asked him the wrong question again. Okay, he's reined it back since then. Good news for journalists. But there's that bit of spice, there's that bit of something that you don't quite know what's going to come from Verstappen. And I think for the whole sport, that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, he's the son of Jos Verstappen, which is one thing. And then being in the team of Red Bull, it's a great combination for us as fans to watch that continue to evolve. Whether he'll stay there, because can Red Bull really challenge Mercedes in the end? We don't know. But hopefully with the new regs, it'll allow him to. But yeah, it's a perfect thing to watch. And Max is just getting better and better. Back when he first joined, we thought he was maybe a little bit too aggressive with his defending. But again, it's that attitude. He does not give a toss about anyone else apart from himself. I think he was asked, oh, would you like to win your home race? Would you like to win this, that, the other? He's like, I want to win any race. I don't care if it's my home race, whether it's Monaco, just get me a race win. So yeah, he doesn't care and I love it.
And he's still just 22.
How is he 22?
It's just ridiculous. There's drivers like Latifi coming in older than that when they make their debuts now, and he's got such experience, and yet he's still 22. He could be around for another 20 years.
Don't depress us, Chris. We were just getting on so well. Right, that's all we've got time for. You lovely people, I'm going to let you go and get on with the rest of your week. However, before you go, I want to know, and I haven't prompted you with this, so I apologise, but at what point do you think Lewis Hamilton will win the championship this season? Let's start, Matt.
Never, because he's not going to equal Michael Schumacher's record, because I'm a Michael Schumacher fanboy and Max Verstappen's going to win the championship.
Wow, that would be a turnaround and a half. Okay, you need Hamilton to have some sort of slight biking accident.
I'm dreaming right now. But no, I think probably 3 or 4 races to go.
Okay, I liked your conviction, Matt, at least. Lou?
I like Matt's first scenario, actually. I'm going to go with that one. Whenever it is, it's going to be too early. Because I think obviously once a championship is won, it just removes some of the fun from a fan perspective of tuning in. I mean, you've got to feel sorry for a bloke when everyone's getting bored of him being so supreme and the team doing such a good job. But it's the way it is, isn't it? It's a shame.
Chris?
Yeah, and he's good at the boring stuff as well, like Sunday in Spain with tyre management and getting amazing pace out of it that even his team were amazed at. But you try and convey that to a fan and say, actually, what you've just seen is really impressive, but they're bored by it. So that is a shame. I think Imola. I think he's going to go win it at Imola because I think that's going to be 4 to go after that, which would be early, but then it's Max or Bottas and they don't look like doing it. And I think that would just be quite poetic, actually. He's a huge Senna fan himself. It will be a Ferrari-owned track as well. So I think he'll get it about there. So he's definitely going to beat Michael's record. Sorry, Matty.
Ouch.
Yeah, well, will it? We hope anyway, because you don't want anything to befall him that would stop him doing that in terms of an accident or something. But yeah, from the way he's performing, like you can't see him not doing it. And hopefully he gets celebrated the way he deserves to be when that happens. But yeah, it would be nice if he's pushed hard to the end.
Metronomic precision, I think, is the term that we're using at the moment to describe Lewis Hamilton. It's scary how good he is at the moment. And on that note, we're all going to go into our zone and be in a daze with the rest of our day. Thank you so much for joining me on Fast Talkers. Thanks to Lou, to Matt, to Chris. Stay safe, Chris, where your travels take you next. Presumably not the Indy 500.
Sadly not. No, I only cancelled that about 3 or 4 weeks ago once they really locked it down. So I won't lie. With all the other travel, the congestion in the F1 calendar, I am not gutted that I have to watch that one from my own sofa with a beer. So I'm looking forward to being a proper fan on Sunday.
I think a lot of people are. Guys, thank you so much and speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Jenny. Bye, guys.